The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Now, A Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde is essentially the story of the devil teaching a local twink how to dread. 19th century London's most irresistible twink, Dorian Gray, is getting his portrait painted, and through that experience, he begins to really value his youthfulness and his beauty. And so he wishes that instead of he himself aging, the portrait would age in his place. And so we follow him through decades of his life as he stays eternally youthful, but the portrait that was painted of him that day continues to grow old. A big part of this story is the idea that age is just not the time that passes, but the things that you go through and the decisions you make. Those are what you wear as your age. And so as Dorian Gray begins to go down a more morally dubious path, and as he does worse and worse things, his portrait becomes more and more aged and hideous, and this sends him spiraling. It is essentially a book about vanity and cruelty and probably class as well, considering that all of the characters we see are terrible people and also rich Londonites. And yeah, it's good. I mean, it's good. It is absolutely 100% ahead of its time. But its time was the 1890s, and so maybe, yeah, it reads more like a book from the 1930s. Absolutely impressive for when it was written, but also not the most easy casual read today. When it was interesting, it was really interesting. But there were also lots of long passages making fun of women we don't know for some random 1890s social faux pas they committed. And so those are the parts where it's a little bit more difficult to get through. I mean, I hate to state the obvious, but believe it or not, yeah, the book from 1890 was a little slow in places. But ultimately, I am really glad that I read it. I just don't have very much to say about it. I mean, I tried to write stuff down, but all I could think about were alternate twink-related titles. The twink death of the universe, if you give a twink a eternal youth. Shockingly, there's nothing more I can really add to the conversation about A Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, other than I'm glad I read it. Didn't necessarily love the whole time I was reading it, though. So for me, The Picture of Dorian Gray gets a 3 out of 5 stars with a stamp of it's really good, though.